Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 132nd episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian M. Hauser, and it's a special Seahawks Saturday because we managed to pull Jeff Simmons right off the golf course, right into the show. You know, it's hot, it's sweaty. He's racing home because he cannot wait to talk about the Seahawks. Jeff, dude, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah. Hopefully, I'm not too sweaty. Hopefully, you can't see on the screen, but it's a humid day in Toronto. I was able to play golf early this morning, and yeah, I was able to make it on time. You're probably a little worried about my whereabouts for a bit, but
I was
yeah,
like, this might be a solo show. It's okay. I've done that plenty of times. I started thinking madly about what my content was going to be, but you came to the rescue, man. You came through, which I appreciate. Um, one of the things I was doing this morning was watching the last episode of the Hard Knocks.
oh, nice.
Did you have you watched that yet?
Yeah, I caught up on it a couple days ago.
So what was your like? What was your general takeaway? Watching that season.
I found the first four episodes really interesting. I thought the access was really good. The finale was not that interesting to me. I didn't think they showed anything all that interesting in the draft room. I was kind of excited for that episode. The one before where you got to see like a lot of the draft planning, that was cool. I thought the access on the show is amazing. I didn't think it made the Giants look particularly thoughtful or particularly impressive. Like the owner's always walking around looking pretty pissed off. He doesn't seem to believe what's going on. The GM seems to like talk about football like a couple buddies at a sports bar. Like they don't seem to have like a cohesive strategy or plan, and they seem to just kind of do things on the fly. I think I said to you a couple weeks ago, like it made me think I could be a GM.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I know some people have been very critical of how they've looked, but I thought the access was really cool. It's furthered my belief that the Giants are probably a team going nowhere, and seeing it up close was really interesting. And I think it would look very differently, that show, with a very different front office. And I've seen some personnel people, like they actually have mentioned John Schneider, like he has such a good reputation in the league. And they would have said if he was on the show, how completely different things might have looked. And he kind of gets laughed at by us and Seahawks Twitter. But I know like the personnel side, like he's regarded. I know Colin Coward was doing a show this week with John Middlecoff, and they were talking about the Seahawks, and they were saying that Schneider is regarded like in their circles as the auto top five GM. And we have Derek on our chat making fun of him all the time. And we're always joking about him. Sorry, Derek,
Uh-huh.
not to throw you under the bus, but it's just, so it's interesting to see. But yeah, I thought the access was the coolest part. The Hard Knocks, like the training camp one, has gotten really stale and really boring.
Yeah.
This one was cool. And I would love to see that show with another team. I hope they do it again.
How do you think? I mean, it's come out. Daniel Jones wasn't thrilled about how clear it was that they were really eager to get a different quarterback, and I do wonder about that. Like, to some extent, maybe that's just like the way things are in the NFL, and you just know it. But my guess is that for most teams, that wouldn't have been something that they would have made it as clear to the quarterback that that was going to happen. Although they did show them talking to him, telling him like, "Hey, you're gonna see these guys in the building and whatever." So I'm not sure I buy that it was that different, but I think he didn't love it.
Yeah, Albert Breer was on with Rich Eisen. I think it was a couple weeks ago when the episodes were getting really, really good. And he had the same thought. He was wondering, like, is this going to be like the boiling point where like we've shown too much and teams stop giving? Because what happened in Hard Knocks a couple of years ago was, I think when Mike Mayock and Gruden were there, they basically showed nothing. Like they didn't show any of the cuts. That was they didn't show it, and it got to the point where it just became like really watered down the last few years. And this went the other way. So I wonder, like, you're starting to get more of that content. Like you saw the Rams draft room this year, where it doesn't look great that trying to they try to draft Jared Verse and they're sweating out trying to trade up for someone else. So I don't know how much he would have liked that. Same with Daniel Jones. They're talking about replacing him outwardly, and you can see the conversation. So Breer was wondering, like, is this a straw too far now, and our team's going to kind of go away from this? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. We're getting more and more good content, like the draft stuff that Roku did was really, really good. And you get the team like inside the draft room stuff, but they usually cut it out. Like we don't see them talking about other picks as much. But this one was, yeah, this one was something we've almost never seen before.
Yeah, the only other like access thing that I thought was interesting was that they showed that they wanted Kool-Aid McKinstry and Rick Straw, and then weren't able to get either one, and they they wouldn't say it, but they settled for Tyler Nubin,
Hmm.
and while they mentioned it, like they talked about why it made sense, the energy in that room felt like the energy I've seen from John Schneider when he's had to settle for a pick. And it made me think, like, how often have teams that settled for a pick, how often has that pick worked out?
It's funny. Sometimes, like for the most part, I think probably not great. Like some of the team's biggest mistakes, and then sometimes the opposite happens. Like the Ravens, like didn't even like they drafted Hayden Hurst over Lamar Jackson, and like the owner apparently like said, "Look, we need a quarterback." They trade up, I think, going over like Ozzie Newsome's head, and now it's like a top 5 player in the league. So there's times where that happens, and but yeah, that looked like when the Seahawks drafted LJ Collier that year.
That's what I was thinking.
That press conference where you could just read that John was just crushed, but he was trying to sell it. It's just that's what the Newbin pick felt like. I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick walk around the NFL as we like to do on our Saturdays. News of the week, things that stood out to you. I'll kick it off with Rams coverage has been quite excited about Braden Fisk. Early returns seem really good. I'm not seeing the same thing about Jared Verse, interestingly, but I am seeing a lot of buzz around Braden Fisk. But they've also, Rams camp is just littered with injuries. Jonah Jackson, their big free agent signing, is out at least 6 weeks with a bruised scapula. Rob Havenstein, their right tackle, out with a foot injury. Unclear how long he's going to be out. They're dealing with a lot of injuries, to the point where Sean McVay is having to talk about how they're handling it. Any thoughts there? Any things you've heard relative to the Rams that stuck out to you?
Yeah, they've had 3 offensive line injuries already. And Jonah Jackson was big part of probably the biggest part of their offseason. He's out 6 weeks, doesn't get to work. It's a new group. He doesn't get to work with the team. That's a loss. And Havenstein, you said, and I think it was the left tackle, it was banged up a little bit too.
Alaric Jackson, yeah.
So I also wonder, like, you hear all this buzz about Fisk, but he might be going against a bunch of backups. So on one hand, maybe he's just looking good against kind of a lower level of competition, but on the other, it's a little worrisome because he had a really, really good Senior Bowl. He really took off at the combine, and we're hoping that momentum just isn't shooting up because his film last year wasn't all that impressive. The price they paid in the trade was way over the top. Like that was a terrible trade from all indications. So if he's good, it would be really, really upsetting because losing Donald and them having that hole is, I think, if you're the Seahawks, you're the most optimistic that the Donald loss kind of just neutralizes all the progress they've made elsewhere. But if Fisk comes in and he's pretty good, that's upsetting because that might have an effect on Kobe Turner. That might have an effect on the 2 edge guys. Their defensive line is really, really well built if he's good. And to combine that with the offense they have, I think me and you are kind of more bullish about the Rams' progression as a team than the Niners.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that it's just training camp nonsense. But a lot of the people who cover the Rams are also very optimistic. Like it's a very optimistic beat there. Like the girl who covers them from The Athletic is really good. She's one of the best beat writers. Jordan Rodriguez.
Yeah, I've been trying to get a hold of her because I think she's terrific.
She might be like the top beat writer in the whole country now, but she is very Yeah, she is very optimistic though. She's always selling a really good story about them, and it just might be her personality, but she does a really thorough. She's really, really good, and yeah, so that's kind of the energy always around them. But yeah, like me and you really were bullish about their offseason. I'm not happy about it. We thought they took a big jump last year when we thought they were going to be done for 5 years, and kind of reinvigorate Sean McVay. And yeah, that's the team, honestly, that worries me long term more than any other team in the NFC West.
Yeah. Again, the mitigating factor there will or maybe Matthew Stafford, but for now, I definitely agree with you. And who knows? The thing with people standing out on defensive line right now at this point in camp, that can indicate pass rush.
Yeah.
potential, it's hard for it to necessarily indicate run defense. So one of the questions about Fisk, he is, a little bit undersized on the interior line. Is he a guy? How many snaps can he be out there for? What downs can he be out there for? So, we'll see. But that was one thing that jumped out. We just got news on the Cardinals camp today that they lost BJ Ojolari to an ACL for the year, which is a shame. I haven't heard a lot else around the Cardinals camp. It's been kind of like I would expect to be seeing like Marvin Harrison Jr. highlights every other day and how I've heard a little bit at the beginning, but have you heard much from the Cardinals camp?
No, I was literally about to say that. It's been weirdly quiet. Like you see a Malik Neighbors highlight flash across my
Mm-hmm.
For You page every single day, and almost every day like, I've seen something that Malik Neighbors is doing. He apparently is having just an outstanding. I haven't almost heard anything about Harrison Jr. I haven't heard much about Trey McBride, who took a really step forward last year. The only guy I've almost heard buzz about is James Conner, and again, it's training camp. Maybe it looks lighter and faster, but there's no pads on a lot of the time. The injury, it's an important one because they're super thin on defense. Like if you look at if you go on their our lads page, that's the depth chart site I use, and look
Mm-hmm.
at their defensive line, there are not a lot of names you're going to recognize. And Ojolari was an ascending player, not a great one. He was a second round pick a couple years ago, but they just don't have. They have Darius Robinson, who was their first round pick, who's more of like a base level player. But me and you were also kind of uncomfortable by his upside. So there's not much there to begin with. They have some young corners and maybe some young DBs, but their defense on paper, they got way more out of the sum of the group than their talent level last year. And that tends to be volatile year over year. So any loss that they have is pretty big because they just don't have the talent yet on defense.
Before we get to the 49ers, which we will in a second, you kind of were hitting, talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., you talked about Malik Neighbors, which made me think of Aroma Dunze. All the things I'm hearing out of Bears camp is the defense has been ahead of the offense. And I have not seen much evidence to the contrary. And I I gotta admit, it's definitely not to the Russell Wilson levels at all, where I'm like waiting to see Shane Waldron fall on his face. But there's a larger part of me than I would have thought that is really hoping that Shane Waldron just like falls on his face in Chicago, like and that it's demonstrated what Seattle that Seattle was in a problem situation with him as the OC. I don't know why I care about that, but for some reason I do.
I think it would just justify a lot of your thoughts on watching the foot team last year. And I saw Mina even the other day was like, well, like we had to take Waldron out of this. The offensive line was so bad. I didn't agree with that. I actually thought Mina was being far too friendly to Waldron.
Yeah.
But yeah, I said this I think last week, but there aren't many coaches in the league right now that are going to have a bigger spotlight on him. With those three receivers, the investment they made at Caleb Williams, and again, they're not a great pass protecting team. Like a lot of people criticize them for not taking a tackle where they took Odunze when they already had Keenan Allen, DJ. They paid DJ Moore $30 million a year extension, and if he can't figure out how to work the three receivers, which was an issue last year when they went to 11 personnel in Seattle, they almost didn't know what they were doing. They almost lost their identity. I mean, Smith and Jigba was hurt at the beginning of the year, and they weren't playing him as much. They were almost more effective on offense with the heavy sets, with the tight ends, and that was actually the best Waldron we saw was when how he used the tight ends and the creative personnel groups. Once they went out wide with the three wide and they lost that tight end look, I think Nathan was the first one to bring it up on our show, whereas like they almost don't know what they're doing. Now, Chicago, they're an 11 personnel team exclusively with those. They took a top 10 receiver, trade for Keenan Allen, who's been a number one receiver, and they already have DJ Moore. And they're not a good pass blocking team, and they don't really have the tight. They have Gerald Everett, who's more of a pass catching tight end. Is he all of a sudden going to be able to be this 11 personnel team? He was not able to do that in Seattle with the same kind of structure where they weren't a good pass protect team. And that was with Geno, who's a really good at like identifying pre-snap quarterback. So now you have a rookie quarterback who's more of a creative. I'm with you. I have a lot of questions whether this is going to work, and everyone's just like, "Oh, they have all this talent." this might be trickier, and I would kind of enjoy it. I'm with you. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, yeah, I think Chicago is certainly one of the most intriguing teams in the NFL this year, no matter what, and how they fare on offense is going to be part of that. Let's talk about the 49ers for a second, Jeff. They continue to have a turbulent offseason.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's gone easy for them. And it looked like Brandon Ayuk had signed a deal, right? Is that how you read that handshake and intro? And now they're saying no, it was just nothing. And if it was a deal, you'd think we would have heard something. Colin Cowherd, I think, came out saying everyone was kind of saying it's about to happen. But now there are more trade rumors coming out about Cleveland and Amari Cooper, and I still think he's going to sign. But like, what's your take on what's happening there?
One, I'm sick of hearing about it. Like, I am just
Ugh.
tired of the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes. Every time I'm watching some football show, it's all they're talking about, and nothing has changed. But yeah, like you said, like with Colin Cowherd, and then a lot of those like fake Twitter insiders were like, "This is getting done today," and then we saw the handshake, and we're like, "Okay." And then radio silence, and they come out and say, "No, that's just how they greet each other." I think Shanahan said that.
Yeah.
So frankly, I'm sick of the story. Like, either sign or get traded. Just I'm tired of hearing this drama. I don't think he's relevant enough to be worthy of 3 months of NFL content. A lot of their signings have gone like this, and then they end up signing the guy at the last minute, which is what I predicted ultimately would happen months ago. I'm hoping it gets more turbulent and they keep struggling because, yeah, it's kind of messy around there because Trent Williams is out right now. They haven't paid him yet, and their offensive line apparently looks horrendous in training camp.
That's what it sounds like.
I know the San Francisco PR staff, aka David Lombardi, talks about how good Brock Purdy looks, but it sounds like he's had an up and down camp. And we saw the difference when Trent Williams was in the game last year and when he wasn't. And I think Ayuk wouldn't have the same kind of effect, but if he's not there, they don't have anyone who can run routes like that. And they still have a crazy amount of weapons. But yeah, it's been turbulent. It doesn't sound like things have gone all that smoothly. And this is what happens. This is why Super Bowl losers tend to fall off the next year, because everybody wants something for themselves. The team isn't really cohesive. And they have a lot of the tendencies of what happens to a lot of Super Bowl losers. And people start wanting money. People care about themselves. It's really hard to come back up that mountain. And they have the talent, but if you're like measuring, I was joking, Ben Baldwin put out like the Vegas market rankings, and San Francisco is like clearly number one. And I wrote like, well, you're a robot, so you can't measure vibes. Like, can robots measure vibes? I don't think he got the joke, but their vibes are off. They're off. They seem like they're about, and maybe I get owned on this later, but they seem like they have a lot of tendencies of that Super Bowl losing team that kind of takes a step back the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they'll sign all these guys, but this week was not a step in the right direction for them.
Yeah, I thought when DJ Moore signed his deal and then that handshake with Ayuk was like kind of the next day or the same day, I was like, okay, maybe that's the dam that broke the dam. And it was like 27.5 APY. 49ers been apparently offering around 26. Like, I think Ayuk wants like 28, whatever. Maybe they met in the middle. So far, nothing. So that's one thing. No progress on the Trent Williams front. It sounds like Ricky Pearsall has been okay, like nothing great. He's just getting back into it. Sounds like they've got some guys in the secondary that they're excited about, young players that are developing. And then Brock Purdy, making his progress. But like, there's nothing coming out of that camp that's like, oh no, like they found this next. I think Malik Mustafa sounds like, unfortunately, seems like he's going to be a good player for them. As soon as that pick went in, you and I had the same reaction. But
yeah, that was.
Yeah, we'll just have to keep watching that team. I don't think they're going to be bad. So I don't think they're going to be bad. Are they going to be as good as they were last year? Right now, I don't think so.
Yeah, and what you saw with the Eagles, like Jalen Hurts had like one of the best Super Bowl performances we've ever seen. They came this close to being the Chiefs. And the next year they were still started out pretty good, but something kind of felt off the whole year. And then I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I just remember texting you watching them, like they don't look right. And
Yeah.
then they had the precipitous fall off in the second half of the year, where the coaches almost got blown out of the building, and they lost to Drew Lock. And I can see the Niners kind of having a year like that, where they started off pretty well, but something doesn't quite feel right, and they're not kind of that dominant. Like last year, they should have won the Super Bowl, and the fact that they didn't is great for us. But
It
that
is.
I don't know if they'll be able to climb that mountain again. I hope I'm wrong about that. I'm right about that one.
Anything else that you've that's caught your attention this week around the NFL?
Yeah, Justin Herbert is already injured. So
Yeah.
Justin Herbert doesn't not from a Seahawks perspective, but Justin Herbert is in a boot right now. He's not going to be able to, and it's going to be a lingering injury. So that's a big one. I was kind of excited to see how he would play with like the Jim Harbaugh system around him. So that was pretty big. Not much else. This week things should pick up a little bit. The preseason's going to start for the whole league. We should see some more practices with pads. But no, this week I was really focused on the Seahawks. That Geno stuff obviously took a lot out of us, and very relieved.
Yeah, let's go there. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen you as concerned about Geno Smith news as I did see you this week. Walk us through your series of feelings and thoughts when the Geno Smith news broke.
It was funny because me and you basically like completely 180'd on each other, because you sent like, oh, Geno's not practicing today, and then you sent like the emoji of like the ugh. And I'm like, all right, like Justin Herbert just got injured. Schefter was right on it. There's no tweets on Geno. He's got to be fine. And then the team spoke and McDonald's spoke, and I started thinking about my trip to Seattle and watching Sam Howell versus Bo Nix. And I got to a bad place. I was like coping like crazy over like Brady Henderson's tweet, and I started panicking. I was being selfish, really. I did not want to watch Sam Howell versus Bo Nix, especially for the opener. And like, I'm so excited to come to Seattle for this game. And the buzz on Geno has been really, really good. And everyone who's been there nationally, I heard Robert Mason this the other day that he went to Seattle hoping to be proven wrong on Geno, and he went the complete opposite way. Instead of talking to people in the building and watching him practice, he's completely even crazier about Geno. So I am excited to see Geno in the Grubb offense. I really am excited to see this Grubb offense operate. And also at that time, the reports on Sam Howell had been pretty awful. It seems like he's gone a little bit better since then. Mm-hmm. So you went all of a sudden after hearing the coaches talk, be like, this doesn't sound like a big deal, when I started panicking. And so I was very relieved to see that tweet from Schefter. That was a good calming thing for me. It's mostly because I'm coming to the game and flying in that time. If it was just Howell versus Knicks for 1 week and I was watching on TV and I could have my 3 screens going, and I'm just so pumped for what's going on with the Seahawks right now. I was on with Rob. I know you had Rob on yesterday, and it's just, I talked about this, how like a coaching change can just like bring the life back. Like, I'm excited to read practice reports every day, and I'm excited to hear about what's going on and listen to all the interviews. And that kind of got lost the last couple of years. And Geno has been one of the bright spots of camp. And if he went down for like 6 to 8 weeks, like Herbert is right now, and they're running practice with Easton Stick, or they had Sam Howell and PJ Walker, a lot of that enthusiasm just goes away. So hearing that was super relieving. And now I'm just as excited for week 1.
Well, yeah. I mean, my general thoughts there. I mean, first of all, Rob, I don't think I've seen him as enthusiastic and bubbly. I never would have described Rob Staten as bubbly, but he was pretty excited. He seems like just really happy with the state of things, which is great. And, you know, the Geno thing, I have the benefit of having watched a number of the practices and watched him work and watched what he's been doing. And he's already shown me he's ready for the season. Like, his command of the offense, his chemistry with the receivers, his quick release, quick like throws. Like, Yes, more snaps are going to be helpful always, but this is not a situation where, oh man, he's got the new offense. He's going to need a ton of reps to get up to speed. He looks like he's already pretty much there, and I think that's a huge credit to him as well as to Ryan Grubb and the rest of the starters. So I'm not too worried. This did not seem. I mean, I also saw when the injury happened, and so it would have been really surprising to me if it was something serious, unless he's made of porcelain. Um, but you're not expecting it. You're not wearing your hip pads. You get hit by a defensive lineman. It hurts. Whatever. So glad that that's all the case. I think even if it's a few weeks that they decide to rest him, I'm not worried. But as we kind of head into the scrimmage today, as we step into the scrimmage today, this typically has been a pretty pivotal moment in training camp because rookies, other like new players that are trying to make a name for themselves either do or they don't, and like the reps start getting locked in a little bit more as you get towards the first preseason game. But there's also been, unfortunately, there's been some pretty meaningful injuries in this game at different times. And so obviously number one thing we want out of today is good health. But I'm curious, Jeff, if there's other things that would make you feel good if you heard like about a specific player, about certain things. Like what are you hoping to hear from the scrimmage today, knowing Geno Smith won't be playing?
I'd like to hear some more buzz about some of the offensive linemen. It sounds like Cross has really looked like he is ready to kind of at least take a step forward. I don't know how big it will be, but I'd like to hear more buzz about Christian Haynes. Anthony Bradford apparently you were there, but he had some good buzz coming out of that first day, but it's gone kind of radio silence since. And I just want to hear some more buzz about some of the offensive linemen and how they're looking, because I think that sets the floor and the ceiling of this season more than any other position. Byron Murphy, obviously, it sounds like he had a really, really good week. It sounds like he's really taken a step forward. You've talked about the 1v1s. It sounds like he's looked really good. He's just flashed. He got to start in one practice with some injuries. And those two, I think, obviously offensive line, defensive line are so much of what I value in a football team. And the other thing that interests me is the cornerback room. And I want to hear more about the cornerback room, because it sounds like we all thought that Witherspoon would be more of a nickel corner, maybe outside on base, but he's in mostly a nickel. But it sounds like he's mostly moved outside, which has opened up possibly a door for either Artie Burns or maybe DJ James could play a bit. So I'm really interested in how that group looks. So again, I want to hear some more offensive line like flashing stories. I don't know if we'll see how much about that. But again, with the quarterback not in there, I don't know how the wide receivers will do. Their timing might be a little off. So I'm not so much concerned about that. It's more the offensive line. Can they move people off the ball? We talked about it earlier. I want to see them be able to create a running game this year. And I know there's been a lot of talk about Kenneth Walker, but for me, so much of the offensive line has to set the table for that running game. And just last year just felt like every time they tried to run, it was like a dead play, almost like one every two times. So I want to hear buzz about the offensive line. I want to hear Byron Murphy flash. I'm really interested how they line up their defensive backs.
Yeah. The Witherspoon thing's a good call out, just in that my first thought was, okay, they want to get him reps outside because he needs to be able to play all these different positions. And I still think that that's a possibility. And Spoon even said in his press conference, I don't know where I'm playing yet. I'm just getting reps and like I play wherever they want me to play. But the reality is, like, Trey Brown's had a mixed camp.
Yeah.
And I think Trey Brown's kind of had a mixed career. And as much as I am a huge Trey Brown fan, reality is he led the team in defensive pass interference, like in penalties last year. He has a tendency to have that challenge. I still am seeing that tendency so far. He is smaller, and him going up against DK a lot of times is a pretty big mismatch. And he's been beat sometimes, but he's also made a number of plays. So it's not crazy to me that they believe that their best three corners are Spoon and Woolen outside and Burns inside. I think that's real. And basically the calculus there is that Burns is a better nickel corner than Brown is an boundary corner, an edge corner. So it's one to watch. I'm not sure that that's like written in stone or anything yet, but that's a good one to call out. Anthony Bradford's an interesting one as well. Jeff, my read on him is he is the same guy as he was last year, essentially, like strong, like a bull, going to have some really impressive flash plays. Also, going to get beat in pass pro more than you want. And I don't think he's as problematic in that way as he was last year, but I can't say like, oh man, he's taken a massive step forward or anything like that. So yeah, I'm not seeing like huge strides there yet.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that once the games start and they have more padded practices, that Christian Haynes laps him. It doesn't sound like Haynes has had a crazy explosive camp or anything like that. It sounds like he's been kind of steady, okay, up and down. But I think the more he gets time, I think he's going to just be a more consistent player than Bradford would.
That's a really good description of him. I think that's a good description.
What the Seahawks need, they obviously need some all pros, but they just need some steady guys. They need steady players in that group. I think that's what I did like about the Haynes pick and why I kind of thought he would go before the Seahawks picked. They just need someone who's like almost Chris Gray, who can just be solid and not just be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And last year, Bradford, again, he did flash, but he was awful in pass protection. And he just got beat off the snap and killed plays before they even started. I think Oluwatimi is kind of this opposite of how you described him. He'll be fine in pass pro, I think, for the most part, but I don't think he's going to ever be a good run blocker. And it doesn't sound like his core strength has been that much improved from all the reports. So I read Jeremy Fowler today. It said the team is still interested in Connor Williams. They are.
Oh, it did.
It said they're still interested in signing him. This was in his article. He didn't tweet it, but he said that he's still a little bit away from being able to play.
So, I want to pull that up. I'm not even going to wait.
If you could get the exact wording, it was an ESPN article just going through him and Dan Graziano's visits to camps.
Okay.
So,
but yeah, there. Buzz from NFL training camp.
Yeah.
And let me jump into.
You could click like the C option. Anyway, I'll talk while you're looking it up. Yeah. So I still think the fact that they are interested in Connor Williams is pretty telling. I think they would like to upgrade the center spot. Haven't heard much about Laken Tomlinson. I think I kind of have a pretty clear idea of what he is. Cross taking a leap, as everyone has talked about, would be very meaningful. I think that's one of the biggest stories of the season. What Cross does, what Kenneth Walker does, what Woolen does. These guys, we need more players being from good to great. So Olatimi's someone we were hoping could become a quality player, but he might be more of a backup, more of an Evan Brown kind of guy at this point.
This is actually meaningful news.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple things in here. So let me read this from Jeremy Fowler. So everyone open your ears. If you were dozing off, perk up. This is something you want to hear. This note from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN says Seattle's offensive line is still a bit unsettled. Free agent Connor Williams recently visited the team, and while the Seahawks have interest in signing him, nothing is imminent. Williams is recovering from a serious injury and still needs time. For now, rookie Oluwatimi is getting first-team reps at center. Okay, so that's the Connor Williams news. Confirms again interest. Nothing's imminent. So good. All that's fine. This next bit, right tackle Abe Lucas might need most of the preseason to recover from a knee issue that has him sidelined, but he should be good for the regular season. Abe Lucas should be good for the regular season. When I did my prediction show for 53-man roster, I'm going to do that every Friday just to update my predictions. I had Lucas on the 53. That's just a gut I've had. When I look at that guy, I think he's going to be ready. I don't think they're going to have to wait 4 weeks into the season. This is the first hard news I've seen that seems to indicate that could be possible. That's pretty big, Jeff.
It is, because again, they need players to take big step forwards, and they need guys to really establish themselves. I like George Fant a lot as like the insurance policy at right tackle. He's a steady right tackle. He played for a good Houston team last year that was a playoff team. But Lucas looked like an impact player. And they need, if they can have Lucas, I think it updates the ceiling of their team now. I think it updates the ceiling of their team later. And the good thing is they can kind of ease them into the games as well. But if they don't have to they put him on the pup list and have him miss 4 to 6 weeks. I think that's as good as a development as you can have right now, because I think he's very important to this thing. And it doesn't seem like this is like a career altering injury like it seemed to be. It just seemed like a really lengthy injury that he had to get over. So if they could kind of establish him as that right tackle again, and we saw the difference in their like ability to throw quickly last year when he was in versus out. He has a big impact on their team, and he looked better than Cross as a rookie. So I think that's very meaningful. I completely missed that news, to be honest.
Yeah, now I want to read some of these other bits here. So this is why you're the best, dude. This is why you're the best, because you always are reading everything, and I think I read everything, and then you come on this show, and there's always something that you've heard or listened to that I have not. So let me just tweet this real quick so everyone's got the same info. Let's see what else Jeremy Fowler says. He starts out talking about Geno Smith. Quarterback Geno Smith is a compelling case to vault into a new tier. He loves play caller Ryan Grubb's offense. Spent the summer working out in Los Angeles, blah, blah, blah. It's shown. Smith starting out camp on a hot streak. The stigma of Smith has failed as a New York Jet backup, stopgap. Here's what Geno Smith said. I know I'm one of the best. That's not just me saying it. It's proven. It's on tape. I think for me, I can't focus on those types of things. I have to be where my feet are and be the best player I can be. The key for the quarterback is to be in control. That's what I love about it. Grubb gives us complete control. I would say picture Peyton Manning, what he did in his career, lining up, looking at the defense, trying to figure it out. Obviously, they're going to disguise, and we have ways to go about handling that. Just trying to figure out what the defense is and always get into the best play. There's always a solution. Jeff, I mean, that's night and day compared to what I felt like they had with Waldron last year. Like, just going to keep hammering on Waldron. Sorry.
And that's why, like, I was crushed the other day. I hadn't read this article yet, but so much of this season to me is about, I think this is, I talked about going into camp. The thing I was most interested in seeing the Grubb offense. I didn't watch a ton of Washington last year. And then seeing Geno in this offense. And I think this is a massive year for Geno's career. And I think what Fowler said is really interesting, because if he plays at the level that he's shown in camp, or that you believe he can play to, he's going to really change the perception of his career. And even now, like, there's people who think like you or Robert Mays, and then there's guys like me, and there's people I have buddies who are Seahawks fans that think Geno is the worst quarterback in the NFL. And I don't know how you could possibly come to that conclusion. Even if you don't like him, I still think you can put him somewhere in the middle. But there are people who think that way. And I think this is a year where Geno can really establish himself as a tier above where he is. And he's kind of locked in as kind of like the Jared Goff, Brock Purdy's, where you get crazy variance in how they're looked at. And I think that's what I'm so excited. And that's why I was so crushed the other day. I think Geno in this offense, and you talked about the comp between Geno and Penix so much last year. It would be really hard for me to get excited about Geno with Waldron again, or Sam Howell and Ryan Grubb, even though Sam Howell, I think, will be better in the games than he is in practices. I think Geno's ability to read defense, and one of the things I have admired about Geno is his pre-snap recognition and how good he is at reads. And watching Russell Wilson all those years, Russell's playmaking was at a level I've never seen before, but he was not good at the stuff that I really valued. And it's probably why Matt Hasselbeck has been my favorite Seahawks quarterback of my lifetime, because he was so good at that with Holmgren. And I've really admired Geno, and I think that's what like the film nerds admire about Geno. So when you watch him play, he reads defense as well. He makes the right throws. And now if we can get him some basic stuff, some easy throws, some open throws, using the whole field, it could really unlock him. And I think that's what Fowler's alluding to.
So speaking of unlocking different parts of the field, Fowler goes on to talk about JSN and talks about the progress he's made. He said, this is Geno Smith saying, Smith-Njigba has made tremendous play after tremendous play. He's focused. He's engaged. I trained with him in the offseason and was so impressed with how mature he is for his age. McDonald noted that he's a tireless worker. I'm telling you, Jeff, You know what did you and I talk about? I mean, you were the poster child for JSN last year. That was your guy. But what did you and I like? We were all excited. What do we want him to be? We want him to be a receiver that could control the middle of the field and unlock like those types of plays, especially on third down. He has been he's been mayor of the middle during training camp.
And why I really wanted them to draft JSN last year, I honestly didn't think it was possible. And the Jets, for example, they really whiffed on their pick. Will McDonald's have been struggling, and they need a receiver.
Still believe in Will McDonald.
I was reading about him. I can actually tell you what's going on there. But if you watch Lockett and Metcalf play, the degree of difficulty of their catches always seemed so high. And when just watching them, everything seemed always a challenge. And some of that was Russell, some of that was the offensive scheme. But it's kind of just how they are. Like for Lockett and Metcalf to work, they have to do things that are really high degree of difficulty. But then I'd watch other teams play, and I'd watch Robert Woods play with McVay. And we saw with the Seahawks a ton, and Cooper Kupp. And you'd see how easy things were for them on like third and must have it's. And I was like, the Seahawks need a guy. Julian Edelman killed the Seahawks in that Super Bowl and was with Brady all those years when they needed a play. You just have the guy in the middle of the field. And Smith and Jigba, he's not the deep speed, tall. He doesn't project as the number one receiver to me. Mm-hmm. He always projected as that perfect complementary to DK, where DK does what he does really well, but they never had the almost an easy button, the middle of the field guy. And McVay's done it. And I was hoping last year that, and all the buzz was like, oh, JSN will be the Cooper Kupp in the offense. Waldron was with the Rams. Waldron had no idea how to use this guy, and it drove me nuts watching it last year. So hearing that he's done that, and JSN has a very obvious skill set and some limitations. He's not the most explosive guy, but his agility numbers were like Doug Baldwin-esque. And you watch how like Amon-Ra St. Brown plays, and I don't see any reason why JSN can't have that same kind of game as him. And hearing that from everyone that he's done that in camp, and something I wouldn't have picked up from watching the TV copy, but it sounded like JSN struggled with a lot of the mental side of the details on routes. I know Griff talked about him running the wrong route sometimes. And It sounded like it took him a while to get that going. In the second half of the year, they saw a totally different player. This is where we see a lot of year one to year two jumps, because being a receiver pro to college, there's a lot more detail and a lot more just how you run routes and how you beat guys. And you're not playing against guys that are going to be like insurance salesmen the next year. Everyone is like the top player in college. So it sounds like he's gone way better on his details. He's gone way better in his like practice work ethic. And now they have the offense, and they have a very clear role to unleash him. I think he's ascending. Lockett's descending. I think he's going to be a big part of this offense, especially on third down, if they're going to be the team that we think they can be.
I think you nailed it. Two other quick notes from this article from Fowler. Actually three. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Talks about Noah Fant coming off career lows in catches and yards. But they think Grubb's passing attack can help. And Geno Smith said, I think he's our best kept secret. I think Noah Fant will get utilized more this year. Another note here is they have a major battle at backup receiver. Positions 4 through 9 are up for grabs, is what he says. And not that there's going to be 9 players on the roster. But Jake Bobo is the top, but he believes former second-round pick D. Eskridge has come to play this camp. It's really interesting. I'm telling you, Jeff, I watched these things, and D's made some plays. It's not like he's totally absent. He's not the guy that I would call out as coming to play this camp. So I don't know. I haven't seen it, but there they are. And then the last note here, and this is the one that to me is a sneaky storyline for the Seahawks. This McDonald quote says what you need to know, everything you need to know about running back Kenneth Walker's fantasy impact. Quote, every time we go over the roster, running back coach Kennedy Polamalu gives me this little grin and hint like, let's feed this guy. He can be special. Zach Charbonnet always comes up in running back conversations, but Walker surpassing his 219 carry total would not shock. So I think Kenneth Walker, if you're going to pick one guy to benefit the most from Ryan Grubb coming in, I don't think most people would say Kenneth Walker first, second, or maybe even third. He might end up being the guy that benefits the most from Ryan Grubb.
Yeah, and because everyone always wants to compare the apples to apples comparison to Washington. Well, they had the running back of Washington he was a fine college player.
Yeah.
And but
Already been cut in the pros.
Already been cut in the pros. He was more of a UDFA kind of player. Kenneth Walker was like a Heisman level player. And we've never really seen Grubb with a running back talent like this. This guy was one of the best probably the best running back in college football. He basically carried Michigan State to relevance, and they've completely fallen off. So anyway, Grubb's never had a talent like this before. And I think that's what Polamalu is probably so excited about. Because when you watch Walker's first year, he did stuff that, like, he hit home runs at levels we haven't really seen a lot of play. Like Rashad Penny had that 4-game stretch, but Walker just looked like a dominant player. And Polamalu's been around Dalvin Cook, and he's been around a lot of these guys where he's kind of gotten the most out of these guys. That's what I think a lot of people were excited internally about that hire. And I think Charbonnet fits well. He's like a straight ahead power runner. He's a really good complement, but the home run hitting ability of Walker, and if they can get him in control with better coaching and better scheme, I think people almost forget, because of how boom or bust he's been, how talented he is. And that rookie year when he was on fire, he looked like best running back in the league ceiling. And I think his buzz just really fell off last year because of he makes a lot of mental mistakes, and he hasn't probably been coached well enough. And hopefully they have now a coach we've seen get the most out of. Like Chad Morton was like a competent running back coach, but I don't think anyone would be running to hire that guy. You put him in this offense where they haven't had a special player before at running back. I'm with you. I think he could blow up this year.
I got a couple other questions for you, but before I guide us down there, what else? What's on your mind? What are you thinking Seahawks wise?
What's going on with the pass rushers? Like who's stepping up? There's been some talk about Boye Mafe one day. There's something that goes quiet. Draymond Jones hasn't practiced much. Like we haven't heard much other than apparently Chenna looks really good. But like what's going on with the rush group? Who are you excited about? Who's going to work in this defense?
Yeah, the edge rush group, that's a great question, because it still looks to me like a group of B players.
Yeah.
There's nothing I've seen from Mafe as like, oh man, he went from nothing to 9 sacks and now he's going to be an alpha rusher. I don't see anything that gives me that impression. In fact, I would argue he has been blocked better in 1v1s than most of the other edge rushers. Now he has had pressures during team drills. It's not like he's beaten Charles Cross. Like he is still Boye Mafe. I'm not saying like he went from having 9 sacks to being a nothing, but I think he's most likely going to be a career 5 to 9 sack a year kind of guy, probably settling mostly around 7 is probably the kind of player he's going to be. Yeah. But maybe he shocks. Derek Hall has had, I think, the most step forward where it looks like he looks like a guy that you want in there as much as you'd want Boye Mafe in there. I think he's a different type of rusher, different type of player. He's more of a speed to power guy, but he's had a good camp. Chen has been fine. I mean, as long as he's not going against Charles Cross. Charles Cross it's like not even worth watching because he just erases him. It's one of the interesting things, Jeff, is they've had some of the edge guys rushing against interior guys as well. Like Chenna's best pass rush in 1v1s have come against guards.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something to be aware of. And then like a sneaky thing to kind of think about is that Jerome Baker has been a pretty prodigious blitzer over his years in Miami. And watching the 1v1s with linebackers versus the running backs for blitz pickup, Baker's a handful. And I mean, I'm not saying he gives me like Jamal Adams light vibes, like just one of those lighter guys that's a little bit harder to block, gets around people and can apply pressure. So, yeah, I think edge rush is not going to be this team's strength. I think they're going to get their best pressure by combining with the interior guys on games, twists and stunts and things like that.
Well, and the good thing for the Seahawks perspective is I don't know if they're going to run the same scheme they ran in Baltimore, but the McDonald scheme, and I think you'll see more probably in the games. What they did last year so well is they were able to get these kind of like guys who have been disappointing players clean routes to the quarterback. And Kyle Van Noy, who's kind of fallen off, and Clowney, we saw Clowney the year in Seattle. He's not a naturally gifted edge rush. He just wins with pure power. Someone like Maffei or someone like Hall, if they have just clean wins, I think McDonald can create a lot of sacks for these guys. And that's something that I think they're a little fortunate. I don't think you need like the Myles Garrett. Like when you run the 4-3, you need like the Cliff Averill off the edge winning. But if with Seattle, if you don't know where the guys are coming from and you can't tell who's dropping and who's going, I think that will really help the edge rushers put up better numbers than maybe their talent levels are. And I think this is a kind of group that you can effectively run the defense with. I don't think you need the Micah Parsons to run this defense.
Well, I want to take a moment to just welcome Kalani, Bill Anderson, Pat McDonald, a bunch of folks that have joined as Patreon members. We're trying to get to 50 new Patreon and or YouTube members before the regular season, so I will be able to cover some road games for all of you. I think we're up to about 10 to 15 folks that have already signed up this week. If we could just keep that number growing, it'd be great to get you added to the family. So patreon.com/hawkblogger gets you all the audio versions ad-free of this show, as well as access to the Slack channel where there's a lot of great conversations going on. And then the YouTube membership, you get highlighted. We get to see where you are and respond to all your comments and questions, as well as other bonuses. Depending on what level you are, you can get access to some of the interviews I've been doing on demand before they get released to everybody. So patreon.com/hawkblogger, or join as a YouTube member, or do both, which a lot of folks are doing as well. Tried to make that a reasonable thing to do. If nothing else, give the show a like and click subscribe. Greatly appreciate that. Yeah. So, what else? I had some thoughts about guys that on the Seahawks roster may be the most likely to be trade candidates.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious your thoughts on this.
Trey Brown?
Possible. Mike Jackson? Possible. Yeah. Darrell Taylor?
Yeah, he's one. I've kind of, the numbers don't look great on him. If you already have the edge, if Draymond Jones is exclusively playing edge, he's kind of seems like an odd fit.
Yeah, he'd be probably the fifth guy. And I think they like Nelson Caesar. He's played well. I also think Josh Onujiagu, who no one knows, but he's jumped out to me. Number 49, if you're going to the scrimmage today, number 49 on the edge. I think he's also a good special teams player. So, and then there's probably some offensive line possibility. Stone Forsythe. I don't know if anybody would trade for him, but he seems like a possible trade candidate. Maybe someone in the receiver room. If for some reason, I thought Laviska Shenault had his best practice a couple days ago, but maybe if for whatever reason they like some of the other guys instead. So that one feels like a stretch. But I don't know, Jeff, if they were to make a trade, where do you think that maybe Nick Harris, depending on if they think something's going to happen with Connor Williams.
Kobe Bryant, maybe?
I don't think so. I think Kobe Bryant's solidly their fourth safety, and I don't think they're going to move him. I think he's also a good special teams player. So I think he's pretty solid. He's solidified his spot on the roster, I think.
So it doesn't leave much else. I don't think there's a receiver that anyone else would really clamor. I don't think there's a tight end there.
Mm-mm.
I don't see much. I know corner is really the one area.
My bet of all these would be Darrell Taylor.
Yeah, I think that's the best one. What about Mike Morris?
That's an inch. I mean, he could gain some interest. He's had a fine camp. He hasn't had a like great camp, but he's been good. Maybe if they want Matt Gotel on that roster instead of Morris, but I just don't know how much of a market there'd be for Morris. It's hard to say. He'd have to
Yeah.
do something in preseason to get some attention in order for him to have
Yeah.
sufficient value.
Maybe the Chargers. They got a bunch of Michigan guys there.
Fair. Yeah, fair. That's a good point. But like, yeah, that's one of the things as we, get toward the end of camp, which we're not there yet. That'll be interesting. I'm not going to travel to Tennessee to watch joint practices. I thought about it. Could have met you there.
I thought about going, but everyone tells me it's way too hot there this time of year.
I just, I can't make my family have to deal with me being gone as much. I mean, I'm already gone every day pretty much now, but that'll be like, I think joint practices are going to tell them a lot. And I'm kind of fast. I'm still stuck on this Connor Williams things, dude. If they're interested, but nothing's imminent and he's still recovering, why isn't he not making other visits?
The whole thing is very peculiar. I can't wrap my head around that. I was thinking about writing some of the beat guys whom I know his agent, trying to get.
You should like see what you find, because it just doesn't like the typical thing would be an agent like Rosenhaus would drum up interest, set up visits, and even if they were light visits, just to make an appearance of a market for the player and make a team feel uncomfortable and maybe feel like they got to move. The only thing that would kind of make sense is if they have an agreement in principle, but they're waiting a little bit longer on something in camp or some medical thing. But if it was like, hey, we got to wait and we got to watch our guy a little longer, it doesn't behoove the agent or the free agent to say, okay, yeah, we'll wait to talk for any team until you're ready. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
No, I couldn't quite square that one. And even I saw Brady actually just tweeted out the Fowler story. So I don't know if he got that from you or that was just passed along internally through ESPN, but he didn't tweet that. He tweeted like Geno Smith is going to run more. Like that was like, of all the notes, that was like last on my list. So it was interesting to see that. But yeah, I'll do some digging because the whole thing's kind of been odd to me where like it clearly seemed like they were trying to get someone else to sign him. And usually that would proceed to another visit, but it's been radio silent on his end until this came out today. So
yeah. All right, brother. Well, unless there's anything else, we can give you back the rest of your Saturday. Anything else that we didn't cover?
We covered almost every position, which is pretty crazy when we talk about it. Quarterback, receiver, tight end, O-line, D-line, linebacker. Like the one guy I'm kind of interested in is Tyrell Dodson. It sounds like he's been a cool player in camp. Everyone's so worried about that linebacker position. I'm not nearly as worried unless there's an injury. I'm more worried about depth than the two starting guys. Am I right to be excited about him? Like he seems like a fun player.
I think we're gonna enjoy watching him play. I think he is a seek and destroy middle linebacker that really just attacks the hole. And like there was one play, Laviska Shenault was on as a red zone and they were doing an end around or something to him. Chenault's pretty fast and pretty big. And it looked like he was going to just have a clear path into the end zone. Dodson came out of the middle of the field just like a blur. I didn't even see him until he was at Shenault. And he hit him, but didn't fully unload. If he had chose to unload, it would have been a big collision. And that was the flash play for me. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to feel this guy. He's going to pursue. He's going to be a guy that I think attacks the ball carrier in ways that I felt like at times we haven't had with Seahawks linebackers. No. I hear Jordan Brooks is having a great camp for the Dolphins. I'm glad for him. For me, he didn't make enough plays in the backfield. He didn't make enough plays at line of scrimmage for a really impactful linebacker. And I think Dodson could be that. And then the question is coverage, and his grades are excellent in coverage. Griff will say, hey, his grades were excellent because he had really simplistic duties as a coverage player. I don't know. I don't know that, so I'll have to see more. But
yeah, and it wasn't the coverage that kind of left me uneasy with Brooks. It was I wanted to see splash plays. And when you watch all the best linebackers in the league, you saw it. And it sounds like from how he's practiced in Miami. Maybe he's doing that. Maybe they're using him better. But over 4 years, we didn't get to see it really. And some of that was injury, some of that was scheme. Maybe we could blame Clint Hurt for that. But when you watch Bobby and KJ play, like they would just, by the way, like KJ used to blow up a screen pass. Like the first time you watch KJ Wright play, even his first game as middle, you're like, this guy is smart. And this guy just like blows up plays. I almost never saw Brooks blow up a play.
Yeah.
And I hope he does that in Miami. We're going to see him week 3. Maybe we'll eat our words then. But linebacker, he went for cheaper than I thought he would go. But we thought he was going to be like $15 million player. But again, I'm not beating my head over that one. I know some people are.
2 things before we wrap, actually. So one, we got a super chat. Miller Muse, unless that's supposed to be Muse, says, will I be seeing you at Football Fest at Lumen today? I will be there, but that kind of leads me to my second bit. So, Jeff, this is my first time sitting in a press box. I need tips from you. What are the do's and don'ts in a press box?
You're not supposed to cheer ever. It's like the most looked down thing. It's hard, and it's hard to like. I was in the press box when the Seahawks played the Bills in Toronto, when they won like 60-10, and Russell went nuts in that game. It took everything out of me not to like smile. I had to try to be professional. I don't know what the Seahawks are like during the practice game, but the one thing I learned covering NFL games or other sports is they give you a ton of food, and you might not see this until the regular season. So try not to stuff your face for 3 hours, because I was shocked at how much food they gave relative to like other sports that give you like a little buffet at the end of the game. They were bringing out meals after quarters. Like sometimes there's like fights for ice cream. It's crazy. So you have to like pace yourself. That's one thing. I don't know if it'll be like in the mock game. It might not have that like NFL level service, but there's even articles of like which press boxes have the best food in the NFL. So that's something you're really going to see, especially in the regular season. And otherwise, it's the same as you're sitting in the view and try to get a good seat too. Sit with the right people. You don't want to sit beside a guy you can't talk to. You're sitting there for 3 hours. I don't know if the preseason game will be like that, but sit by the right people. If you want to sit there and crack jokes with someone, and you have rapport with pretty much everyone in there. So I think your seat is really important. I don't know if the food will be out there, and you're not supposed to cheer. That's the number one rule.
Yeah, I'll probably fail that test multiple times, but I'll do my best. This is why I plan on watching the games, the home games all year in the stands, because I plan on screaming my head off. And if I do go to a post-game press conference and ask a question, you're going to hear my scratchy voice because I'm going to have been screaming my head off.
Yeah.
That's good advice. So we'll see how it goes today. Do have a little bit more news from Brady Henderson. He tweeted out that about Connor Williams, that it's his understanding as well that nothing's imminent, but that Brady's gotten the sense that money is the issue more than health, with Williams wanting more than Seattle can pay him.
Oh, interesting.
Seattle's got money to pay him.
That's particularly odd, because it's not going to help Schneider's reputation of lowballing players. They just cleared $2 million in Julian Love. They opened up $10 million.
Yeah.
If they need money, there's easy ways. That's a bit surprising to see. I figured it was far more health and playing time.
Just extend Geno Smith.
Yeah, there you go.
Easy.
But that's a shocking. It's a little disappointing, to be honest.
If they don't, if Jeff, if they believe that he's going to be healthy and believe he's going to be the same player he was, which is a 2 big ifs, but if they believe those 2 things and they let money get in the way of making their football team significantly better, shame on them.
Especially at that spot where they don't have any money, like in that spot. Like offensive line is one of the most expensive positions. They're paying Laken Tomlinson, Anthony Bradford, and Christian Hayes the equivalent of rookie contracts. Their center makes nothing. George Fant is a mid-level right tackle. We wanted them to spend $15 million on a guard. I don't know what he's asking for, but it can't be an exorbitant amount. If they let money be, this is not a great look for a team. This has been a 10-year issue at center. Just pay the guy. Like, I'm sorry. I can't deal with another bad year at center.
I know. And I'll just say, play it out for a second. Let's say that they do spend more than they've got budgeted available. Okay, then you don't have enough money available to sign guys if there's injuries. Or maybe you have to have a smaller practice squad, which I don't think they would do. But like, I will take the chance that they have to not be able to sign a guy, that's an injury replacement, or that they have to create cap space later in the year to handle injury replacements, rather than lose out on what is essentially an all-pro center. Like, let's not screw around with this stuff. Just get the guy
this
out.
is not an area you mess around with and try to pinch pennies or try to get him only at your certain level. This has been a Schneider tendency, and frankly, it's been one that's been bothersome. And I think there's the idea that he lowballs players. I think that's wrong. They've made a lot of people the highest paid player at their position. And we saw what they paid Quandre and Draymond Jones. But a lot of people have come out saying the Seahawks, Golden Tate said it. And I think this is not the position to mess around at. If you're not comfortable with Olu Oluwatimi, there should not be we're only willing to pay this guy $4 million, not $7 million.
Now, here's the one thing I'll say that could be a different interpretation.
Yeah.
It might be how much guaranteed money they're willing to give him. And that I would 100% understand, because Connor Williams has had injuries. He's just coming off an injury. And so I had just assumed that whatever contract they would sign him to would be heavily incentive laden, right? And that if he is not able to come back, if he's not able to play sufficient snaps, that they wouldn't have to pay him out that much. That makes sense. If Rosenhaus is trying to say, hey, no, he's fine, pay him more guaranteed, then I can see that being a hang up. So I'll give him that out. But otherwise, man, this is not like a 35-year-old journeyman. This is a 27-year-old top player at the position. And you're lucky to even have a chance to bring him in. So
just pay the guy, man.
Pay the guy.
Don't be cheap. Don't try to save money for IR. When all these cap guys always come out and be like, you need to save $7 million for IR and injury replacements. And I'm like, well, every team seems to find a way to do it. But when the Seahawks fans talk about it, it's like some sort of master thing that they have to project. There's always ways to create money because there's people they can restructure. They can borrow from the future. You don't mess around at interior offensive line. It's the weakest part of the team. So you have some digging you could do today. I'm sure you're going to come across Brady. So, man, I hope it's just like he's asking for a little too much and that maybe the Seahawks aren't comfortable with his health yet. But I really hope that if they end up being weak at center and this guy signs anywhere else, I hope that this is not the storyline. It would be very frustrating.
Agreed. All right, everybody, we're going to call it a wrap there. If you haven't given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. Make sure you follow Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. This has been episode 132 of Hawk Blogger Mornings, your Seahawks Saturday with Jeff Simmons. Hope you enjoyed it. I will hopefully, I think, go live later today. I can't promise, but I think I'm going to go live with a post-practice, post-scrimmage report. But the only way you'll know is if you click the bell to get notified, and that is when I will go out there. So cheers to y'all. Take care.